Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Today on our interview show, MBA.com Talks, we have Chelsea Gardner, who is a recent graduate from the UNC Kenan Flagler School of Business. So thank you so much for joining us and talking to us today. I would love to hear just a little bit. I know you graduated in 2020, which was pretty recent. One of the biggest questions we get from recent graduates is, did you have to do any part of the program, remote because of COVID? How did that affect your experience and what was that like?
Yes. So, one, thank you so much for having me. That's a great question. I would say that I was in a unique experience because I was studying abroad, basically like right into January and through February. So, right as COVID was starting to, I guess, come into full form and people were starting to get a better idea of it. So, I was in South America with my classmates.
Oh my
Totally kind of
gosh.
like out of the loop of what was going on back home. And then kind of towards the end of the month, we started to realize that it was getting really bad. So we ended up coming home. As soon as we came home, I think it was like maybe a week and a half before we were on lockdown. So I spent, I would say, like my last semester of business school was remote, which was tough because, again, I had been out of the country. So I didn't get to spend kind of the first chunk of the semester with my classmates back home. But I felt like, so obviously, well, I'm not sure if your listeners know this, but UNC has a really great online program. It's ranked really high. They've been doing it a really long time, so it was very easy for us to switch to the online program, and it ended up being a really good experience. Most of us, I would say, stayed in the area. We followed rules. But we still tried to do our best to virtually hang out and virtually meet up. So I definitely had a virtual graduation, but I think that under the circumstances, the school really did their best to pull everything together, and I'm so appreciative of that.
hmm And so for any people sort of thinking about applying to online programs, just from your brief experience, would you say that it's manageable and comparable to your classroom experience, or how would you compare those two?
Yeah, so I'm in the camp of if you're going to do a full time MBA, and you have the ability to go in person. I'm in the camp of people who say do the in person one. If you have other conflicts that keep you from doing the in person, then obviously yes, do online, right? Like it's kind of what works for everyone. For me, in person, it's still 100% what I would do. I had a phenomenal in person experience. It was the mix of kind of really immersing yourself in a new culture, the network, all of those study abroad and traveling experiences that I mentioned. I feel like those all played a role, and I'm not sure that some of those outside elements online are quite the same. But I do think that like you have to do what's right for your schedule, and I do have obviously a deep appreciation given I spent my last chunk of time online for the program, but totally encourage in-person programs. Like really immerse yourself in it if you can. Definitely one of my best decisions.
Nice. So I was so eager to ask that question. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So,
Yeah.
how did you initially decide to attend UNC?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to apply through consortium. So the consortium is essentially like a network of schools who are dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a part of their mission and what they want to just see through their program. Their students like have that be embodied in everything that they're doing. So they commit to joining the consortium, amplifying the voices of minority students, and it's predominantly, I would say, Hispanic, Latinx, Black students, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American as well. So just a really concerted effort to amplify those voices and to highlight representation in not only business school, but in the business world. And so I was doing my research, really like into my network to see more about and learn more about consortium. Felt like it was a great fit for me to apply through consortium. So with consortium, you can apply basically up to like a certain amount of schools, and it's a high number. And so you just send in, it's almost like a common app. You send in the application, you may do individual things for certain schools, and then they let you know if you're invited to interviews.
Then once you graduated, I know you have a really interesting position with the Colgate Palmolive partnership as assistant brand manager. So was that something that you kind of naturally fell into? Was that part of an internship experience,
Yeah.
or how did you land yourself in that role? Because that sounds really interesting.
Yes. And you'll hear me say consortium a lot, but I have a
That's
lot.
awesome. I
I'm
mean, a lot of
grateful for the
people
program. Yeah. So
using those
actually,
resources is so
yes,
important.
I got that opportunity through the consortium. Consortium
Wow.
has an orientation program the summer before you enter business school. It's a very rigorous kind of like time where we're having to, before we even enter school, really lock down our interview stories, really know what we want from our next career so that we can get in front of companies and obviously pitch an interview. And so, it was like 2 to 3 weeks before I moved to UNC. I went to Florida and went to this conference that the consortium had, which was amazing. It brought all of the students from all of the schools together. So it was a lot of people. So you're already expanding your network there. And so we just had an opportunity to network with companies.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then I don't want to take too much of your time. I know it's kind of
Yeah.
early in the morning. I just had kind of final question was, considering that most people who watch these are eager to get into their school of choice, they're, applying to a bunch of different schools and want application advice, like what would be your number one piece of advice, especially for people looking to attend UNC because that's such a popular school, especially right now, but also just in general for the application process and kind of how to make yourself stand out at the top
Yeah.
schools?
Yeah. And honestly, there's no like one size fits all, right? And I know the application has changed so much during the times that we're in. And so I guess a part of me wants to say, and what I initially was going to say was make sure you're visiting the campuses and talking to the people, but only obviously if it's COVID safe.